Hello and welcome to Channels Book Club. I am Olakunle Kasumo. Nigeria continues to fascinate and baffle social, economic and political scientists remotely interested in the country. From being a young nation with tremendous prospects in 1960 to becoming one with largely unrealized potential almost 60 years later, Nigeria has come a long way as a developing country. Central to determining Nigeria's developmental pace is the extent of involvement of the Nigerian army in its politics. For more than half of the almost 6 decades since independence, Nigeria was directly ruled by a military government, largely composed of army officers and always headed by one. As a matter of fact, it is impossible to explore any facet of modern Nigerian history or society without the army looming significantly. This book, titled HUBRIS, focuses on the political history of the Nigerian army. It explores the impact of the army's direct involvement in politics, both on the army as an institution and the Nigerian nation as a whole. Joining us today to review the book is its author, Akintunde Akinkunmi, who is a medical doctor, a lawyer, and a high-ranking officer in the British Army, in which he has served for more than 20 years. Enjoy our chat. Dr. Akinkunmi, nice to have you on Channels Book Club.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Again?
Indeed.
Now, I found your book very moving. I love this country, one of the best for this country, like the rest of us. But at times, when reality dawns on you about how the country has been led, and the intricacies of governance in Nigeria over many years, at times you get very worried, deeply worried, about the country. And while reading your book, as fascinating as I found it, it was also very disturbing to learn about the history of the army in Nigeria, the army's intervention into politics and how that has affected. Well, let's start from something that sums up what you've written in this book. In this author's opinion, both country and army have suffered as a result of the latter's involvement in politics. And there is plenty of evidence to back this up, both before 1999 and the years since. I think this sums up the book pretty well, right?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the idea was to trace the evolution of Nigeria as a country, trace the evolution of the army, and do so in parallel, and then look at the interaction between the politics of the country and the Nigerian army, particularly the effects on both sides of the army's involvement in politics. And it's that process that led to the conclusion that you have just referred to. But beyond that, the fundamental reason for writing this book is that it's a history book. And I am a firm believer in the idea that if you do not know where you're coming from, it is almost impossible to work out where you're going. And that brings me back to the comment you made about your concerns about, which way Nigeria. And it is precisely actually because we need to be clear about where we're going. And in order to do that, we must not, absolutely not, repeat the mistakes of the past. And there are several generations of Nigerians who regard themselves as well-informed, who are utterly ignorant about the details of the history of our country. And that was the principal motivation for writing the book.
I'm always scouting for books, particularly books like this. I have a keen interest in Nigerian history. This seems like the first of its type. I mean, there are so many books that have been written about Nigerian history, the military history in Nigeria. I quickly remember Soldiers of Fortune by Max Siolun,
yeah,
and quite a number like that.
Indeed.
But this seems very comprehensive, very detailed, and very focused on the political history of the Nigerian army.
Absolutely.
Is there any other one like this?
I think that this is probably the first one that I am aware of that makes that interplay between the army and the country and the politics of the country the primary focus of the book. You're absolutely right. There are several other excellent books out there. Max, a friend of mine, 2 beautiful books on the Nigerian army, but those were focused largely on the stories of the coups, which was not actually the principal focus of this book. They're related because it is impossible to kind of describe a military government without kind of thinking about the process that brought it to power. So yes, there are plenty of other books. There are, any number of really distinguished scholars about Nigeria's military history. Max Yolin you've mentioned, Noah Moigui is another one. There are plenty of those books. There are also books written by non-Nigerians. Norman Miners wrote an excellent history of the 10 years of the Nigerian history of the Nigerian army between 1956 and 1966. John de St. Jean wrote a brilliant book about the Nigerian Civil War. So there are plenty of other books that look at this, but I think this is the first to focus on that specific area of study.
You're a lawyer, a doctor, and a soldier.
Yes.
I've never seen that combo before.
I'm not sure I've seen it before either.
I've never, first time. Lawyer, doctor, soldier. Now, what prompted you to write this?
Well, I've always been fascinated by the institution called the Nigerian Army. That is a lifelong fascination, and it will remain with me till I die. In fact, that actually was what drove my seeking out a military career. Okay. And I served very briefly with the Nigerian Army.
I was going to ask you that. Did you ever serve with the Nigerian Army?
Very, very briefly. And that was 32 years ago, something like that.
So most of your military career has been with the British Army, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, interested in the Nigerian Army. I'm also a passionate Nigerian, a very, very passionate Nigerian. I am and always will be a Nigerian. So what pertains to this country I take very personal. And I have kind of looked with increasing disbelief over the years how we seem to be going round and round, recycling the same errors over and over and over again. And that saying, I think it was Santayana who said that those who do not learn from history are condemned to repeat it. I think that's actually playing out very, very large in Nigeria at the moment. And so those two things meant that for years I've been kind of seeking out information on this subject. This book is the culmination of easily 12, 15 years worth of research, and another year in the writing. So you will note from looking at the book that it has an extensive bibliography because there, as I said, there's plenty of other literature, from which I gained different bits of information. I also was privileged to be able to talk to some of the participants in some of the events that we've outlined here. And I think so putting those two things together and keeping the focus on that particular area I wanted to look at, I think is what's produced the book that you're holding in your hand at the moment.
Well,